human capital. These tools are very robust, measuring from cradle to grave the full impacts of products, beginning with natural resource extraction, to fabrication and manufacturing, to packaging, to shipping. They also take into account the impacts of how consumers use the products, and ultimately how the products are disposed of when they are no longer serviceable. For these reasons, they're called value chain indexes, or VCIs. These various categories of impact are called the life cycle stages of a product. And you can think of them as the where of the externalized cost to the planet. But in each of these parts of a product life, the impacts themselves can be thought of as the what that is impacted. And VCIs measure them all, and does it in remarkable detail, from impacts on land use, water, waste, biodiversity, to chemicals and toxics on people and on the environment, to the product's consumption of energy as well as its emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, these value chain indexes are the essential first stop on that roadmap to how we can get back to living within our means. To understand why and how they are essential, I'm going to ask Rick Ridgway, my friend here for many, many years, to describe a unique effort now underway in the apparel and footwear sectors.
Well, thanks, Kip. It's a pleasure to be joining all of you as well. And I'll start by explaining that this effort began a couple of years ago with what was truly an odd couple pairing of two iconic brands, Walmart and our own Patagonia, which you would all have to agree at best is very, very odd set of bedfellows. But early in 2009, we invited Walmart to partner with us to invite a select group of companies into a coalition that would have the goal of developing a tool to measure sustainability that would become uniform across the entire apparel sector. So I met with several high-level Walmart executives, and I told them that what if we code-name the effort David and Goliath? And they said, well, okay, as long as we're David and you're Goliath. And I said, well, whatever, as long as we can get the job done. So in October of 2009, we sent a letter out with the logos of Patagonia and Walmart on the masthead, and it went out to the CEOs of almost a dozen other companies, inviting them to attend a meeting where, and I quote from the letter here, we told them that we expect to achieve consensus on the need for a universally accepted approach for measuring apparel sector sustainability, and to establish a strategy for ongoing collaboration to create and implement that standard. And as one executive who got this letter later told me, when you get a letter with the logos of Patagonia and Walmart right next to each other, it's just so bizarre that you don't throw it away. And we succeeded in getting all the companies, as well, I should add importantly, several NGOs and also some academic institutions to form the coalition. And in April of 2010, we had our first meeting. So the strategy was really carefully considered. And we decided right from the outset to invite into the group only companies that would be willing to work together to build the strongest possible tool, with no one in the room trying to weaken it. But at the same time, to get enough companies with enough size to create what we refer to as gravitational pull. And frankly, we've really been astounded and surprised at how fast the group has been able to move forward. And in just a little over a year, we've also been surprised at how many new members we've added, with many more major apparel brands and big manufacturers and suppliers in the supply chain, and also notably footwear companies. There's about one new company a week right now that is coming into the coalition, and we've calculated recently that we collectively have over 30% of the global market share for apparel and footwear in the room. That's the entire planet, all the clothes and shoes that are made on planet Earth. But I think most importantly is that everyone is working really hard in a truly pre-competitive environment so that in just a little over a year since we had that first meeting, we now have a version 1.0 of this index that's ready to go live in the supply chains of all the member companies. And we've already seen...
Rick, it's Julia. And just to clarify, why are all these people excited about joining the coalition?
Well, Juliette, Jim and I have talked about that, and we think it comes down to actually a complex of reasons. And in aggregate, they seem to be why people are voluntarily signing up to do this. And the most obvious one is that, as we all know, when you get into the article, you see we define this as Sustainability 1.0, and it's simply that they recognize that following sustainability practices often lowers costs in the supply chain. But the leading thinkers are also realizing that sustainability goals also benefit risk and minimize the otherwise public exposure that a company has over either perceived or actual misconduct in either the social labor arena or the environmental impact arena. And the third driver seems to be a recognition as well that following sustainability initiatives truly does improve reputation. And as Jim and I point out in the article, not only reputation, but that translates often into the equity value of a company tracking its sustainability performance. Then the fourth driver seems to be an effort to get ahead of regulations. And again, we talk about that in the article as well. But in our view, and Jim and my view, the most important driver, well, not most important, most interesting driver of all is that, and we know this because we've been working directly with all these people inside the companies, from the CEO levels on down through SVPs and VPs. And it is amazing how many of those individuals are driven to do this because they are committed to doing the right thing. And that is a monumental ground shift, I think, in what's going on, or what's driving people to get involved in this. So, back to where I was at, we've already seen how the index can measure the impact of a product along its life cycle, as Jim said, from cradle to grave. But the real driver of change and the real strength of the index is that in each category of impact that you see on the screen here, there's also going to be a score that goes next to it, a 0 to 100 rating, with 100 signifying the best environmental and social labor impact, or to put it another way, 100 signifying the lowest externalized cost. Now the index is also useful because we've designed it to have three views, or think of it as three different ways of looking at the information, just like you might have a different view in your email box to organize your emails around the date or the subject and those sorts of things. So one of the views that we have in this tool is what we're calling the brand view. And here the scores from the various categories of a product's impact are rolled up into a single product footprint, or as you can see here, a rating. And then all the products in a company or a brand will further be rolled up into an overall rating for the brand. And then this gives you a sense of what goes into this view. Here is a screenshot of one of the pages in the index itself. And this index has hundreds of pages like this, just to give you a sense of how robust it is. But here in this example, we're looking at aspects of a company's responsibility with the chemicals that they use in their supply chain. And it's asking questions like whether they have a list of restricted chemicals, asking about how transparent they are with their chemicals policy, asking about whether they have a good verification and certification system for their claims. But then the real value comes when all the scores are rolled up into an overall score for the brand. Now, let's
So
talk
in other
about,
words, Rick, a brand such as Patagonia, for instance, would be maybe evaluated by a buyer like a Walmart, and they're looking at these scores, and the scores represent this kind of sum total impact of decisions that were made at all these different parts of the value chain, like where did they source the cotton, and then how did they dye it, perhaps, and so and those decisions would have been made by different firms along the value chain.
yeah, that's right. They aggregated into a brand view. You know, with the caveat here that we'd never be in a situation where Walmart's sitting down with Patagonia to talk about how their ratings going. That's one thing we told them when we called them up and invited them into this partnership to try to launch this coalition. Hey, this is about sustainability. It's not about you guys trying to get our brand. So we got that squared away right away. But anyway, you're right. You're right, Julie. So I often think best in terms of illustrations. So let's do one right now where let's imagine that we've got a chief merchant in a large retailer. Maybe that's the guy on the left of this stock shot that we got. But anyway, the idea is that the retailer is a member of the coalition, and he's sitting down with the CEO there, and it's the CEO of Brand X. Actually, that's the guy on the left as I see what's going on here. So the CEO of the chief merchant then takes out the index, and he's got the sheet in his hand there, and on the index is the rolled up rating for this Brand X, and it shows the performance, and he reviews it with the CEO, and then he says, look here, your rating on the VCI report I just got is about 78%, and your competitor here in Brand Y is coming in at 85. And then he says, now, this is a problem because we don't see enough improvement, and we're not, and we've got to see some better numbers. And we're not talking about 5 years from now, because we all know that in business we've all got a lot of choices. So in that little scenario that we imagined, you can really, I think, visualize the potential impact of a measurement tool like this index. But that's not the only way that it can have impact. Another way is through the lens of what we're calling the factory view. And this was developed so that buyers in a big retailer, for example, can judge the ratings of one factory over another when making their supply chain decisions for their own in-house brands. So this view measures the impacts that are environmental, like energy and water use and greenhouse gas emissions and toxic chemical use and hazardous waste production in a factory, as well as the factory's social and labor impacts with things like wages and benefits and working hours and conditions and health and safety, whether there's even child labor involved. So again, since a buyer can use this in their conversations with factories, you can again see the power of this index tool. But the third way that the tool can have impact is it's used by companies to lower the impact of their products. So that's why we created a product view for the tool. And this was developed so that product designers, as well as production people, could see instant results from the choices that they make, and especially in material selection and sourcing. So let's now take a look at how this might work. And again, let's go back to that pair of jeans that Jim talked about earlier and the impact that those jeans had on the environment. So let's go back to the beginning of that pair of jeans' life on the planet, beginning with the person that designed the jeans. And let's imagine that she's just received a memo from her department saying that the CEO has just met with the big retailer, and the numbers got to come up. So there's been an internal directive telling all the designers that their products now have to meet a higher rating that's based on the VCI index. So that designer may or may not know that her company CEO has just had a meeting with the head merchant of the big retailer, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that she's got a goal that she has to achieve. So the first thing she does is to choose regular cotton, and the number comes, traditionally or industrially grown cotton, the number comes in way short. So then she uses the tool to choose organically grown cotton instead of industrially grown cotton, and immediately her score improves. And this is just a screenshot from a part of the index that she would be using to make these decisions. But even with organically grown cotton, she sees that she's still being penalized because she hasn't indicated where she's going to source the cotton. So she has some swatches that represent her options, and she picks one from a cotton vendor in China, who in turn has sourced the cotton fiber from, let's just say, a farm in western China. But the designer now sees that she's still missing her score, because even though it's organically grown cotton, in western China, it's being grown by using water that's drawing down an aquifer that isn't being replenished as quickly as being used up. So she has to go back to the swatches. And then she finds that she's got another one that does meet her quality standards, and it's from southern India, from a vendor there. So she makes that choice on using the index tool again, and she finds out that the cotton is coming from farms in southern India where the cotton is grown and watered by rainfall. She also finds out that the score is still not maybe perfect, because even though the cotton is being grown from rainfall, the farmers are still using concrete-lined catchment systems that are preventing all of rainfall from going back into the aquifer. So it's not perfect, but the overall impact is still lower than the organic cotton from China, and it's much lower than the industrially grown cotton that is currently used, as we know, in most jeans. So while it's not perfect, the designer and her jeans have nevertheless met the rating goals that were set by the CEO, and most importantly, the externalized cost of her brand jeans have been really significantly reduced. But the fact that she's met her goals by achieving a rating that was a roll-up of impacts, and you can think of it as an overall rating for the product, means that the rating could also be made available to consumers. It wouldn't take a lot of engineering to take the index and build it into a consumer-facing tool. But how would you show a consumer the rating? Would you do it as a label on the packaging or a hang tag? And how could they find out what is behind the rating? What's behind the number? And if they were really interested, how could they access maybe even the index that's under the rating? Well, in the Apparel Coalition and Footwear Coalition, we've been talking about this, and we think that one way forward, or an example of a way forward, is offered by Good Guide. And some of you, I'm sure in the audience, know about this already. But Good Guide is a place where consumers can check out the Good Guide website to find ratings on a product, and they a more cool way to do it is to download the Good Guide app onto your smartphone, and that allows you to use it in a store, so that when you're shopping, you can take a product that you're interested in off the shelf and scan the barcode with your phone and get ratings in 3 categories that include health impacts and environmental impacts and social labor impacts. And if you want to know more, you flip the card, select a tab that allows you to learn more about the product, and then you can start to see what goes behind the ratings. But there is where the biggest weakness in Good Guide lies, because even though they have now rated 100,000 products in a total of 600 categories, their team of researchers that is gathering the information for the ratings and the indicators on the products are still doing so in a way that's probably too opaque. And I think they even recognize this. And Good Guide itself agrees that as far as the back end goes, they're probably only halfway there at best. But what if that Good Guide rating were coupled with a full cradle-to-grave impact assessment tool like a VCI? And what if it wasn't just Good Guide promoting the rating, but all the brands in a category, like our coalition in apparel and footwear? What if they were all consequently giving customers a true apples-to-apples comparison using a rating that they would trust because it was transparent? And then what if that rating was standardized and replicated in other sectors of manufactured goods until all the categories of manufactured goods were using the same system, so a customer buying any type of product or maybe an investor financing any type of company, and Chip, we can get into that later after our presentation here, but they would all be using the same rating and the same scoring standard. Now imagine the increase in awareness that those customers would have about the true impact of manufactured products, of goods that they buy, what the true impact of those goods is on air and water and health. And now imagine how that could translate into political influence, that all those customers, and as we'll tell you about later, all those financiers that are using the index could have on legislators. And there is another potential way that the VCI, the Value Chain Index, could, in our view, as we explain in the article, create the political will to pass legislation and regulations that would internalize the cost, the true cost of business on the environment and on our society. So to further understand this potential, because this is the key part of our argument, I'm going to hand it back to Jim to bring it home.
All right. Thank you, Rick. All right. So let's go back to our index and the ratings that come out of each category of impact. And in particular, let's go ahead and look at the first one. And this really represents the source materials for all manufactured goods. And using our example, the cotton in our jeans, and all the inputs that go into growing that cotton, the water to grow it, the land that the cotton grows on, the petroleum to provide the energy for the fertilizers, for the machines that farm it, etc. And taken together, the watersheds and rivers that give us clean water and the arable land that flows that allows us to grow our food and fiber, and forests that give us biodiversity for medicines, that it stores and sequesters the carbon dioxide to keep our climate stable, and as well as giving us fuel and wood, and ultimately the earth that gives us the minerals and the oil and the coal and all the other things that come from our core soil and whatnot. Altogether, these ecosystems and their services are the foundation of all life and ultimately, therefore, our economy. As David Brower once famously said, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. And, so without any of these services, and there really is no business and there is no economy. But the first and essential step to internalizing the costs of our manufacturing system that are currently externalized into the world, one of the first key ways to do it is to actually assign dollar values to the ecosystem services. As an example, the value of pollinators to agricultural production has been estimated at $200 billion a year. And but currently, again, these, for the most part, these costs are not reflected in the costs we pay for things in the stores. But what might happen if these dollar-based ecosystem valuations were integrated into the value chain indexes? What if the materials part of the VCI, and instead of just an impact rating under it, it also had a dollar value associated with it, so that there is an actual true cost of the insecticides and pesticides in that pair of jeans made with traditionally grown cotton, or even the value of that aquifer in China that's being drawn down by the organic cotton farmers. And already there are rough estimates on the combined value of all the planet's ecosystem services, and the figure is staggering, truly, truly staggering. The World Bank, for instance, has estimated a figure of approximately $44 trillion annually associated with the value of the ecosystem services if we were to pay to have the clean water, the clean air, the pollinators, etc., all in aggregate, if we had to create it. And 29 trillion of that belongs to developing nations. So with figures like this, it's our prediction that once the VCI has been integrated into a dollar-based ecosystem service valuations, and once the true costs of the planet of doing business become increasingly visible, and I think that's really a very important point, is that visibility, the transparency, which is being powered by the increasing demand for transparency and the use of these devices that we all are carrying around. The result will be a major shift in the political climate and the political will, as Rick mentioned earlier, to pass the legislation that begins to thoughtfully internalize these currently externalized costs. And already there are the first indications of this happening, with laws on the books that include, in Great Britain, the UK Climate Change Act of 2008, and most recently in California, the AB 32 legislation that requires mandatory caps on greenhouse gas emissions. And perhaps the most interesting and relevant to the Apparel Coalition is the French Grenelle II law that was passed in 2010 that will require labels affixed to consumer products that give shoppers information about several categories of environmental impact, including greenhouse gas emissions. The most interesting part is the law's requirement to have the measurements based on life cycle analysis data along a product's entire value chain, cradle to grave. And this opens the possibility that the VCI, now in development by the Apparel and Footwear Coalition, could not only be replicated in other sectors of manufactured goods, but it could become the basis for a reporting standard in France and then perhaps the EU. And if that happens, we are predicting, along with a lot of other things have to fall into line, but there could be a global shift that would allow us to start getting the global deal, much like the cap and trade bill that last year passed in the House but was defeated in the Senate. And with full transparency over the true costs of economic activity on our planet's environment and societies, additional laws that not only reduce carbon but increase the cost of unsustainable business practices over more sustainable options that will quickly emerge because the regulation places them in a competitively favorable environment. And what would that combined result be? It's what in the Harvard Business Review article we labeled Sustainability 3.0. When the T-shirt that causes no unnecessary harm to the environment costs less, is the lowest cost to the consumer T-shirt, and it costs less than the T-shirts that are more harmful. And in this situation, when this occurs, when people who, in a sense, are paying less because it is truly the lowest cost item, then bargain hunting would immediately align with business practices that sustain the planet, and that's really what 3.0 would look like, which would mean that there is no such thing as a sustainability 4.0. You wouldn't need it because sustainability would be fully integrated into all business practices and our economic systems, and it would be simply how business is done.
So, Jim, so I just want to clarify that that point does not hinge on consumers making some kind of super enlightened choice where they are choosing to pay more for something with a higher rating. The ratings get communicated to consumers, but the real thing that we're counting on to achieve the Sustainability 3.0 era is that consumers don't have to make that trade-off between doing the right thing and paying the least money. Those things become aligned because the VCI, or value chain index, allows all those costs to be internalized, right?
Exactly. So again, the first step in this process, which is underway today, is creating transparency into the true cost. And then it will require, almost for sure, rules and laws that will begin to actually internalize the costs so that the innovation cycles and how companies and entire value chains will begin to innovate to lower costs, which is exactly what you want them to do, and they do quite well. They're taking into account the true costs so that, and we are, human beings are incredibly inventive and when put to the test. And so the idea is, until you have that moment in time when the lowest cost to the consumer product is lowest cost precisely because it is lowest true cost to the planet, we believe that sustainability will be a fleeting prospect, because you will always have the vast majority of people buying the lowest cost product. And as long as it's lowest cost because it has a lot of externalized costs, you're going to have a lot of externalized costs. So even Patagonia, one of my favorite companies in the world, even if they were to sell, increase the number of organic cotton t-shirts that they sell exponentially, as long as it is not in the mass market, it will probably not be enough to make a difference systemically on the entire apparel value chain. Hence, the need for things like the opportunity of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition.
And this is Rick. Julie, I might add one clarification. It's not the VCI that will create this condition, but rather the VCI is, we argue, a very important tool in its use by different constituencies that in aggregate will create the political climate to pass the regulation and legislation that are essential and required to meet the Sustainability 3.0 condition. And actually that's the core argument in our article, as you know.
So kind of going back to a comment Jib used at the very beginning, you can't measure it, or you can't manage it unless you can measure it. This is providing the measurability across the whole value chain that will not only make for better employee decision-making and better consumer decision-making, but also better policy-making.
Exactly. We get a lot of, we initially got a lot of resistance when we were trying to put the coalition together from people that said, well, why do you want to spend your time just trying to create a measurement tool? Why don't you use the power of this group you're putting together to create new technology to lower environmental footprint, for example? And our answer was that you don't want to do that until you have full information and transparency over the impacts across the entire value chain, so you can prioritize the hotspots and know where to place your resources most effectively to, in a priority manner, lower those impacts. It all starts with a measurement tool that is as robust as you can possibly make it.
So we have some great questions, really quite a few questions pouring in. I think I'll just jump in and start throwing some of these at you if we're at that point. So a number of them relate really directly to the Apparel Coalition's index. And the first simple one, is it publicly available?
I'll take that one. It isn't at the moment because it's in beta testing, and we want to get the kinks worked out of it before we do make it open to the public. And we are going to do that. Right now we estimate that will happen in January 2012, just a few months from now. We expect to have our beta testing done by then. We'll have the improvements that will be revealed by that process into an updated version of the tool. And at that time, we are opening the doors to any company in apparel and footwear or textiles that wants to join the coalition. And we're trying to create a governance for the organization that makes it available, economically feasible for any company of any size to join. It'll be a tiered membership structure, a dues structure. And then sometime later in 12 and probably early 13, it's the group's intention to make it consumer-facing. But we all realize that we can't do that until the tool itself is up and running and done. Because, in other words, to make a truly robust consumer-facing rating, you've got to have a truly robust index tool behind it. So the index tool is step one, and the consumer-facing rating is step two.
So you teed up another concern that one of the listeners raised, that unless this kind of index is totally convincing that it has objective third-party verification going on of the ratings, then it can't get the support of the brands. And are your member organizations at the point yet where they feel like that third-party verification will really be trustworthy? And then a follow-up to that, how often would those tables you showed us, those kinds of rating tables, be updated?
We have a full intention to answer the first question. The first question first. We realize that without verification and certification, that you can't have trust in the index, and so that's essential. And it is on our radar screen, and we're beginning conversations with many rating and verification third-party organizations right now about partnering with them on certifying all the data that comes into the index through each of those categories of impact that you saw on the earlier screens. And that will roll out later in 2012. And then, on the other part, that's the only way that the index, when it's being used by consumers or by equity fund managers or by the companies themselves in a B2B environment, will have that all the users will have confidence in it, that it's accurate and it's fully transparent. And another very important aspect of our goal towards full transparency is having a multi-constituency coalition, so that it can't be a company-only effort. It has to include NGOs, it has to include government, and it has to include academia, and we have those constituencies represented in the coalition right now, and we're actively expanding that representation.
Okay, maybe this may be the last question specifically on the Apparel Coalition's index, but Jip went into the concept of ecosystem valuations. It's a little unclear how those feed into the index. Are you using the ecosystem valuations to get the scores?
Well, right now, the index itself, in its 1.0 version, has qualitative impact indicators and measurements. Indicators, not really measurements, in all the impact categories except materials. In materials, we already have quantitative life cycle assessment data that feeds into the index. And that's because the index in its current form is, in the main, a mashup of the existing work in creating an index that was done by the trade organization in the outdoor industry, the Outdoor Industry Alliance, who created a framework for an index that they were then that they then made available to us. And we coupled that with Nike's existing Considered Index, which focuses primarily on materials assessment, but does it using quantitative data, life cycle assessment data. So the materials part of this 1.0 version is actually much more developed than the rest of the index right now. And because it is based on LCA data, and because that data goes all the way back upstream to the extraction of materials from ecosystem services, that we've got the groundwork laid already for that coupling that we propose in the article of the index to ecosystem service evaluations.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to how this could maybe radiate to some other product categories. Are there discussions going on at Walmart or elsewhere promoting VCI-type tools for other product families, or is this just very clothing specific?
Well, right now it's clothing specific and footwear specific. There is another version of the index under construction right now that is customized for footwear. And again, those customizations happen primarily in the area of materials because, of course, each product category has its own set of materials. But as I explained earlier, the index is derived from a framework that was built by the North American Outdoor Industry Alliance. And because that alliance has members from multiple product categories, from everything from apparel, footwear, of course, to backpacks and tents and power bars and bicycles, that the index was built to be easily modified for any of those categories that I just mentioned, and actually many more as well. So we, fortunately, have a tool built on a framework that is pre-designed for replication in other product categories. And those discussions are going on right now in the Apparel Coalition with some of its, especially with some of the big retailers who are in the group, about how best to pull that off. So the discussions are underway, they're very active, and it's the group's hope that that replication effort can begin early in 2012.
And Julia, this is Jim. I think a key point in all of this is the building up of trust among the critical stakeholders required to push this whole thing forward. And Rick mentioned it in the presentation. In the case of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and Footwear Coalition, the progress that has been made in literally just over a year of effort is nothing short of outstanding. And this is a direct result of, well, Rick's leadership and Walmart's leadership, the initial sponsors of the thing, but a process in which that was tightly managed, that allowed a great deal of input, bringing together people who had like-minded interests to kind of build the initial framework. And so one of the great opportunities is you know, we think about replicating this in other areas is how do you take that model of bringing disparate groups of people together in a meaningful way to quickly come up with prototypes that you then you pilot, learn, adapt, and move on. Because these sorts of efforts can get horribly bogged down, and then, you know, not much happens. And the good news is, you know, the nice thing about particularly environmental related things, you're either putting a pound of carbon into the atmosphere or you're not, and that is measurable. And so the good news is we do have that ability now to measure, and we have the technological capability to actually begin to aggregate and pull this stuff together.
Okay, could you see that? One question specifically talked about oil, gas, and mineral industries, huge impact industries. Are you seeing a lot of action in those realms that would have any analogous approach to what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's interesting is what we're seeing. It is the companies, the big companies, that deal with lots of, I'm going to use a very technical term here, stuff running through their systems that are most attuned to the sustainability issues. And it's not surprising. And therefore, Walmart, when they look at their just material flow-through numbers and the expected material flow-through numbers over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you really start quickly to understand, we live on one planet, and there's not, besides solar energy, there's not a whole lot of inputs into this system. And so in the extraction industries, they're actually quite far along, and we believe there's a great opportunity present in the extraction industry world for some real leadership to acknowledge kind of a lot of the trends that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and really actively, again, play a leadership role as opposed to simply, if you will, milking the brand or just holding on to the existing business model for as long as possible. And we feel like there's an incredible business opportunity resident using these tools to first understand and then to design strategies and innovation accordingly.
And Julie, I'll jump in to amplify additionally on the viewer's question about the possibility of replicating in the energy sector. And I personally believe that a favorite strategy here is to rally a sector to commit to an index that could influence related sectors. So in the case of energy, my own thoughts are that the best strategy moving forward is likely to be engagement with the electric generation and transmission industry because they are pre-designed to be motivated to make a transition to a renewable energy economy, and they're all thinking about that. So they're all pre-set up to be listening to be very favorable to an approach from us, with the possibility of adapting a version of our index to their industry. And I've already had conversations with some industry leaders in the electric, as I said, generation and transmission industry, and I sat down and reviewed the index in some detail with them, kind of like I did with the viewers right now, and they were amazed at how easy they felt the index could be adapted to the electric utility industry. And they had already done some rough indexes that captured the life cycle impacts of their business, and they were remarkably similar to the framework that we had created. So those conversations are continuing to move forward right now as an example of how we think we're onto something that could perhaps achieve this, this large goal of getting all manufactured goods companies on the planet, energy companies, agricultural product companies using an apples-to-apples measurement tool.
Terrific. Now, I think we're down to maybe one last question that we have time for in the hour. It gets back to the realm of consumer brands. We understand that the ultimate success will come when we can align costs to the point where the lowest cost T-shirt is the one that also has the least harm to the planet. But in the meantime, consumers have shown significant price sensitivity on green products, and they're largely unwilling to pay more for products with a lower environmental footprint. And so could we be doing more to kind of educate the public perhaps about externalities and get them to accept the idea of higher product costs? Is there any research to show that just the low rating that you could get to through your index would impact consumer choice?
Well, this is Rick. I'll take that one briefly. At Patagonia, we are trying to educate our consumers, and by extension, bringing in new people to the arena to try and get them to understand these externalized costs, as you just said. We'll have a whole ad campaign coming out this fall and extending through next year, trying to do just that. But it's absolutely an uphill effort, and as the viewer just said, there's a very, very small minority of people willing to pay more for environmentally more friendly products. And it's only going to work when the regulation and legislation forces the internalization of those externalized costs, as we say in the article.
And that said, Julia, this is Jib, there are great examples and all over the world of people who are innovating today in the existing world where you can externalize costs. And I was just in Africa and met with an elephant biologist with an organization called Kamako in northern Zambia, where he has successfully not stopped completely, but really put a dent in the poaching of wildlife in the northern Luangwa Park by training the poachers to be organic farmers and setting up an entire value chain that delivers the products that they are now growing instead of poaching all the way to Lusaka, the retailers in Lusaka, and super high quality, organically produced rices and grains at the lowest opening price point and they're selling like hotcakes. So they're protecting the animals. They're very low. If we were to run a VCI on that value chain today, it would be one of the best I can guarantee on the planet. And the efficiencies have been created so that it has a very, very low price. So it's possible today, and people are doing this. There's a hazelnut project going on in Bhutan that's just unbelievable. So it's happening, and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs are taking the lead today. But to get it into the mass scale, these VCIs are the way to go.
Well, that's just an excellent point to end on, because we've run down the clock, gentlemen. So I need to thank you for your time, and even more for the information and the inspiration that you've provided today. Let me refer our webinar participants to your article, The Sustainability Economy. If they haven't already read it, it's in Harvard Business Review's October issue. And of course, many, many thanks to UPS, not only for its own efforts to epitomize the Sustainability 3.0 era, but for its eagerness to help other businesses do that, including through its support of this webinar. Goodbye now, and have a great day.